Hi there. Welcome to Dreamy Histories channel. Tonight we're diving into one of history's most terrifying experiences, seeking medical help in medieval Europe. Picture yourself waking up in a drafty stone chamber, your head pounding like a blacksmith's hammer, mysterious red bumps spreading across your skin, and the only thing standing between you and whatever's killing you is a medical system that thinks disease is caused by bad smells and planetary alignments. Here's the brutal reality. If you're expecting anything remotely resembling modern healthcare, you're about to discover why most people in the Middle Ages preferred to take their chances with prayer rather than physicians. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. Drop your location and local time in the comments below. Now, let's drift back in time. You wake to the sound of church bells echoing through your shuttered window. But something's terribly wrong. Your head feels like it's been split open with an axe. And when you try to sit up, the room spins violently. The rough wool blanket scratches against your skin. And that's when you notice them. Angry red welts spreading across your arms like spilled wine on parchment. Your throat burns as if you've swallowed hot coals, and every joint in your body aches with the intensity of a rack torture you've only heard whispered about in taverns. The year is 1347, and you're lying in your modest merchant's home in a bustling English market town. Medical knowledge here consists mainly of ancient Greek texts mistranslated through Arabic and Latin, mixed with folk wisdom that's been passed down since the Saxon invasions. Germ theory won't exist for another 5 centuries. Antibiotics? That's roughly 600 years away. Right now, your best hope for diagnosis involves someone examining your urine by taste, checking if Mars is properly aligned with Venus, and possibly drilling a hole in your skull to let the demons out. You call weakly for your servant, Martha, who takes one look at you and immediately crosses herself. "Lord preserve us," she mutters, backing away as if you've already got one foot in the grave. This is your first clue that whatever's wrong with you, it's visible enough to terrify someone who's seen plenty of death in her 40-odd years. She rushes out, promising to fetch your wife, leaving you alone with your mounting fever and the growing certainty that you're about to experience medieval medicine firsthand. The symptoms are getting worse by the minute. Your skin feels like it's on fire, yet you're shivering so hard your teeth chatter. Strange thoughts drift through your fevered mind. Maybe you ate something cursed at last week's feast. Or perhaps that merchant from London brought some foreign pestilence with his fancy cloth. Historians still debate whether medieval people truly believed every illness was supernatural punishment, or if they simply lacked better explanations for the invisible world of pathogens ravaging their bodies. Your wife burst through the door, her face pale beneath her linen cap. She's brought your mother-in-law, because of course she has. Nothing says medieval medical care like having your spouse's mother involved in every intimate detail of your bodily functions. They approach cautiously, whispering prayers and making the sign of the cross repeatedly. Your wife places a trembling hand on your forehead and jerks it back as if burned. "He's hotter than a baker's oven," she announces, which in this era is less a helpful observation and more the beginning of wild medical speculation. It's the bad air from the marsh. Your mother-in-law declares with the confidence of someone who's survived 5 plague outbreaks through sheer stubbornness. She's already moving to the window, stuffing rags into every crack to keep out the mysterious miasma that everyone knows causes disease. This is mainstream medical theory, the idea that foul odors themselves are the source of illness, which is why medieval physicians often wore masks stuffed with sweet-smelling herbs. The fact that avoiding stinky areas sometimes coincidentally kept people away from actual sources of infection only reinforced this belief. Your wife, meanwhile, is rifling through the household medical supplies, a terrifying collection of dried herbs, suspicious powders, and implements that look more suited to carpentry than healthcare. She produces a leather pouch that smells like a combination of rotting eggs and perfume. Mother's special remedy, she says, though you notice even she's holding it at arm's length. Inside is a paste made from ground-up pearls, because nothing says medical treatment like crushing expensive jewelry, mixed with what she claims is powdered unicorn horn, but is definitely just narwhal tusks sold by enterprising merchants to gullible buyers. Your mother-in-law takes charge with the terrifying efficiency of someone who's treated everything from broken bones to demonic possession with the same basic toolkit. She orders Martha to fetch a live rooster from the courtyard. Not for soup, mind you, but because placing a split-open chicken on your chest is obviously the logical first step in any serious medical intervention. The poor bird's still warm innards are supposed to draw out the poison, though what poison and how poultry viscera accomplish this remains frustratingly vague. "We need onions," your wife announces, as if this explains everything. She sends Martha scurrying to the root cellar, while your mother-in-law begins mixing a poultice that looks like something dredged from a swamp. The main ingredient appears to be cow dung, which she's carefully aging in a clay pot for just such emergencies. She adds honey, one of the few actually antimicrobial substances in her arsenal, though she has no idea why it works, and something that might be ground beetles or possibly just dirt. It's hard to tell in the dim rushlight, and frankly, you're not sure you want to know. The smell hits you before the treatment does. It's a unique combination of barnyard and decay that makes your already rebellious stomach perform acrobatics. Your mother-in-law slathers this nightmare paste across your chest with the confidence of a master artist, muttering incantations that blend Latin prayers with older words that definitely predate Christianity. Historians still argue whether these folk healers were preserving ancient pagan knowledge or just making things up as they went along. But right now, you trade your immortal soul for some basic aspirin. Martha returns with the onions, which your wife immediately begins boiling in a pot over the fire. The resulting steam fills the room with eye-watering fumes that supposedly purify the air of evil vapors. She also throws in some garlic, because why not add vampire prevention to your growing list of medical concerns? The mainstream belief is that strong smells combat the bad air causing your illness, which is why medieval sick rooms often reeked like a combination of kitchen garden and latrine. He needs bleeding, your mother-in-law declares, producing a set of leeches from another mysterious pot. She's been keeping them in stale beer, which she insists makes them more eager to feed. The leeches are fat, black, and thoroughly disgusting, writhing in her palm like something from a nightmare. She places 3 on your neck, right where your pulse pounds hardest, and 2 more on each wrist. The sensation of them latching on and beginning to feed makes your skin crawl worse than the rash. Your wife, not to be outdone in the helpful torture department, decides your feet need attention. She's mixing up a paste of mustard seed and vinegar that's supposed to draw the illness downward and out through your soles. The burning sensation when she applies it makes you wonder if setting your feet actually on fire might be less painful. This is complemented by a necklace of dried toads she loops around your neck, because apparently amphibian accessories are essential for proper healing. Between the chicken carcass on your chest, the dung poultice, the feeding leeches, and the toad necklace, you look like you've lost a fight with a particularly vindictive witch. Your fever continues to rage, And now you're also dealing with the psychological trauma of being turned into a walking apothecary shop. Your mother-in-law peers at you critically and announces you're still too full of yellow bile, which means it's time for purging. The purgative she produces is a thick green liquid that smells like rotting vegetables mixed with sulfur. She claims it contains wormwood, mercury, and something called dragon's blood, which you desperately hope is just tree resin. One spoonful and your stomach immediately rebels, sending you lurching for the chamber pot while both women nod approvingly. "See, the poison is leaving him," your mother-in-law says triumphantly, ignoring the fact that any reasonable person would vomit after drinking her concoction. After you've thoroughly emptied your stomach, and possibly parts of your soul, they move on to the spiritual remedies. Your wife produces a small leather bag containing what she swears is a fragment of St. Christopher's finger bone, purchased at great expense from a travelling merchant. The fact that enough genuine pieces of St. Christopher are floating around Europe to assemble several complete skeletons doesn't seem to bother anyone. She presses it against your forehead while reciting prayers in mangled Latin. The real debate begins when your mother-in-law suggests boring a hole in your skull to let out the evil spirits. She knows a man who survived the procedure, which in medieval medicine counts as a ringing endorsement. Your wife objects, but only because she thinks the evil spirits might escape and possess someone else in the household. Neither of them questions whether evil spirits are actually the problem, just the logistics of their removal. Meanwhile, the leeches have grown fat and satisfied, dropping off one by one into the rushes on the floor. Your mother-in-law collects them carefully. Good leeches are expensive and can be reused after they digest their meal. She examines the blood they've drawn, looking for signs in its color and consistency, like a fortune teller reading tea leaves. "Too thick," she pronounces gravely. "His humors are severely unbalanced. We may need to call the barber surgeon." The name barber surgeon should tell you everything you need to know about medieval medical specialization. This is a man who'll trim your beard in the morning, extract your rotten tooth at noon, and amputate your gangrenous leg by evening, all with the same set of tools. Your wife sends Martha to fetch William Blackfinger, whose surname comes from the permanent bloodstains under his nails, a detail that inspires exactly zero confidence in his hygiene practices. While you wait, your symptoms worsen. The rash has spread to your torso, forming angry pustules that weep clear fluid. Your throat feels like you've been gargling with broken glass, and your vision keeps swimming in and out of focus. Your mother-in-law takes this as a sign that the treatments are working, bringing the illness to the surface, she says, though you suspect she'd claim victory if you sprouted wings and flew away. The door bangs open, and William Blackfinger strides in, bringing with him the unique aroma of blood, alcohol, and hair tonic. He's a bear of a man with arms like tree trunks and hands that look better suited to blacksmithing than surgery. His leather apron is a Jackson Pollock painting of bodily fluids from his morning's work, and he's cheerfully wiping his hands on it as he approaches your bed. "Heard you've got the sweating sickness," he booms, completely ignoring your actual symptoms in favor of whatever disease is currently fashionable to diagnose. He drops his leather satchel on the floor with a metallic clank that makes you wince. "Just finished gelding the baker's prize boar. Tricky business, but I got both stones out clean. Now then, let's have a look at you." His examination technique involves poking you with increasing force while grunting thoughtfully. He pries open your mouth with fingers that definitely haven't been washed since the pig incident, peering at your throat like he's inspecting a horse he's thinking of buying. I see the problem," he announces, though you notice he's looking at the ceiling when he says it, Classic case of corrupted blood. Seen it dozen times this month. From his bag, he produces an impressive array of sharp implements that wouldn't look out of place in a torture chamber. There's a phleem for bloodletting. Its multiple blades fanned out like a lethal Swiss Army knife. A tooth key that looks like it could open the gates of hell. Various saws whose purpose you don't want to contemplate. And proudly displayed on top, a trepanning drill that he pats affectionately like a beloved pet. Right then, he says, selecting the phleem with the enthusiasm of a chef choosing his favorite knife. We'll need to open a vein. The corruption in your blood is fighting to get out. See? That's what's causing all this fuss. His medical theory is a fascinating blend of complete nonsense and accidentally correct observations. Yes, your body is fighting something, but opening a vein is definitely not going to help matters. He grabs your arm with his meaty paw, searching for a suitable vein. His fingernails are indeed black with dried blood, and you can see bits of what might be pig bristle stuck to his apron. He hasn't even bothered to wipe the phleem clean from his last patient. Historians still debate whether medieval surgeons understood any connection between cleanliness and survival rates, but the consensus is that they were too busy to care even if they did suspect something. Now, the stars aren't ideal for bloodletting today, he admits, producing a well-worn almanac from his pocket. Mars is in the house of Mercury, which means cutting anywhere near the head would be fatal, but your arms should be safe enough. This astrological medicine is mainstream physician territory that barber surgeons adopt to seem more legitimate. The fact that avoiding head wounds during bloodletting occasionally prevents people from bleeding to death only reinforces the belief in celestial influence. Your wife hovers anxiously as William positions the phleem against your forearm. "How much blood will you take?" she asks. He shrugs with the casual air of someone who's never actually measured anything in his life. "Oh, until he faints, or the blood runs clear, whichever comes first." This is the kind of precise medical measurement that makes you long for the relative safety of your mother-in-law's toad necklaces. The cut, when it comes, is swift and deeper than expected. Blood immediately begins flowing into a pewter bowl that's seen better days. William watches with professional interest, occasionally tilting the bowl to examine the blood's consistency. See how dark it is? That's the corruption right there. Once we get that out, the good blood can flow properly again. Your vision is already starting to grey at the edges, but apparently this is a feature, not a bug. "I remember treating a merchant last week," William continues conversationally, as if you're not actively bleeding out into dingy kitchenware. Similar symptoms. He took near 2 pints before we saw improvement. Of course, he died the next day, but that was probably unrelated. His widow said he'd eaten bad fish. This is what passes for evidence-based medicine in your era. Anecdotal stories where the patient's death is always attributed to something other than the treatment. Your blood continues to drain while William rummages through his bag for his most prized diagnostic tool, a glass flask specifically designed for urine examination. "Right, I'll need a sample of your water," he announces, as if bleeding you wasn't quite enough bodily fluid extraction for one visit. The flask is supposedly made from Venetian glass, though it looks suspiciously like every other piece of glassware in town, just with more pretentious curves. The process of producing said sample while lying in bed, feverish, and actively bleeding proves to be its own special torture. Your wife holds the flask with the grim determination of someone who's seen worse, while your mother-in-law provides unhelpful commentary about the colour already. "Too dark," she pronounces before you've even finished. "His liver is clearly rotting." William takes the flask with the reverence of a priest handling communion wine. He holds it up to the window, letting the weak morning light filter through your urine like the world's worst stained glass. The examination that follows would be hilarious if it weren't happening to your bodily fluids. He swirls it, sniffs it, and then, dear God, touches his tongue to it with the practiced air of a wine connoisseur. Definitely too sweet, he declares, smacking his lips thoughtfully, with a bitter aftertaste and notes of metal, classic sign of excess yellow bile mixing with corrupted phlegm. This uroscopy is cutting-edge medieval diagnostics, based on the idea that all bodily humours eventually pass through urine. Physicians have elaborate charts showing 20 different urine colours and what each supposedly means, though historians note these charts rarely agree with each other. He produces a leather-bound manual filled with circular diagrams that look like demented colour wheels. Each section shows a different shade of urine matched with astrological symbols, humoral imbalances, and recommended treatments. Your sample apparently falls somewhere between wheat beer left in the sun and water used to wash copper coins, neither of which sounds particularly medical. The sediment pattern is very telling. William continues, now holding the flask at various angles like he's reading tea leaves. See how it settles in layers? The thick bits at the bottom represent earthly corruptions, while the bubbles indicate air trapped in your liver. He's making this up as he goes along, but with such confidence that even you almost believe your liver is secretly harbouring air pockets. Your mother-in-law peers over his shoulder, adding her own interpretation. I see death clouds forming at the top, she says helpfully. William nods sagely, though he turns the flask around so the death clouds are now at the bottom. Ah, yes, but inverted death clouds mean recovery is possible. Very different thing entirely. This is medieval medicine in a nutshell. Complete nonsense delivered with absolute authority. The real diagnostic circus begins when William decides your urine needs to be tested for reactions with various substances. He produces small vials of liquids and powders from his bag, adding drops and pinches to samples of your urine in a process that looks more like alchemy than medicine. One addition makes it foam violently. Another turns it an alarming shade of green. A third causes it to emit wisps of smoke that smell like rotten eggs. Fascinating, he mutters, jotting notes in the margins of his manual with a quill that's seen better days. The reaction with quicksilver proves there's definitely corruption in the kidneys, but the foam indicates your heart is working too hard. We need to balance these humours immediately. The fact that adding random chemicals to urine produces reactions is taken as deep medical insight rather than basic chemistry. Meanwhile, you're feeling increasingly lightheaded from blood loss. But William is too engrossed in his urine experiments to notice. He's now comparing your sample to a preserved specimen he keeps in his bag. From a duke who survived the pox, he explains proudly, as if carrying around aristocratic urine is a perfectly normal thing to do. Your wife, showing more sense than anyone else in the room, suggests perhaps staunching the bleeding might be wise. William waves her off. Nearly done here. Just need to check one more thing. He holds the flask up to his ear and shakes it gently, listening intently. Ah, hear that? The subtle crackling. That's the sound of black bile crystallizing. Very distinctive. The consultation culminates in William drawing an elaborate diagram showing how your four humours are catastrophically imbalanced. Blood is too thick, bile too yellow, phlegm too cold, and black bile too black. His proposed treatment plan involves bloodletting, already in progress. Induced vomiting, your mother-in-law's concoction took care of that. Strategic placement of hot irons on your spine, and a dietary regimen consisting mainly of boiled lettuce and rainwater collected during a full moon. "The urine never lies," he pronounces with finality, carefully pouring your sample back into the flask. "I'll need to keep this for further study. Sometimes the truth reveals itself after a few days of fermentation." The thought of William keeping your aging urine in his workshop, possibly next to his lunch, adds a new layer of horror to an already nightmarish day. The blood in the pewter bowl has reached what William considers the optimal level, somewhere between concerning and definitely too much. But he shows no signs of stopping. Your arm throbs with each heartbeat, pumping your life force into a vessel that, upon closer inspection, has suspicious crusty residue from its previous use. The room spins lazily, and you're not sure if it's from the fever or the blood loss anymore. "Beautiful color now," William comments, swirling the bowl like a demented sommelier. "See how it's lightening? That's the corruption leaving. Though I'd like to see a bit more foam. Healthy blood should froth like ale." He presses harder on the wound, trying to encourage your apparently inadequate blood to perform party tricks, while you slide closer to unconsciousness. Your wife's face has taken on an interesting shade of green that matches the experimental urine from earlier. She clutches your other hand with increasing desperation as the bowl fills past what any reasonable person would consider safe. "Surely that's enough," she ventures. But William is in the zone now, completely absorbed in his craft. "Just a bit more," he insists, producing a second bowl from his bag. This one's copper, oxidized to a poisonous-looking verdigris that definitely shouldn't be in contact with open wounds. Sometimes the real corruption hides deep. Had a blacksmith once. Took 3 bowls before we found the bad blood. Course, he couldn't stand afterward, but his fever broke within the week. Your mother-in-law, ever helpful, suggests adding hot irons to speed up the process. She's been heating poker in the fire, just in case, because apparently medieval medical care means always being prepared to cauterize something. The glowing metal reflects in her eyes with an enthusiasm that would be disturbing if you weren't already living a nightmare. William considers this seriously while your blood continues its steady drain into bowl number 2. Not a bad idea, but the stars aren't right for burning today. Mercury is retrograde, which means hot treatments could drive the disease inward instead of out. This astronomical nonsense is delivered with such conviction that even you, half delirious from blood loss, find yourself checking the window for Mercury's position. The bleeding process is suddenly interrupted by commotion outside. Through your increasingly foggy consciousness, you hear shouting about someone's cow giving birth to a 2-headed calf. William's head snaps up with interest. 2 heads, you say? He's already moving toward the door. Your medical emergency suddenly forgotten in favor of veterinary curiosity. That's a powerful omen. Could change everything about your treatment. He returns moments later, splattered with what you desperately hope is just mud, excitedly rambling about the calf's coloring and what it means for local health prospects. Meanwhile, your arm continues bleeding at an alarming rate because he forgot to properly close the wound before running off. Your wife has pressed a relatively clean cloth against it, but the damage is done. You've lost enough blood to make standing impossible, even if you wanted to try. Right, where were we? William asks, as if he didn't just abandon an actively bleeding patient to examine livestock. Ah, yes, checking the blood quality. He peers into the now overflowing copper bowl, poking at the congealing surface with a finger he definitely didn't wash after the cow incident. Excellent separation of humours here. See the dark clots? That's pure melancholy right there. The mainstream medical belief that blood naturally separates into 4 distinct layers representing the 4 humours is based on the actual observation that blood does separate into plasma, white cells, red cells, and clotted proteins. Medieval physicians just assign mystical properties to what's basically normal blood chemistry. William treats these layers like they're revealing profound truths about your soul, rather than just doing what blood does when left in a bowl. Your vision tunnels dramatically as he finally, mercifully, decides you've bled enough. His technique for closing the wound involves slapping a handful of spider webs mixed with egg white onto the cut, then wrapping it with a strip of linen he tears from his own filthy shirt. The spider webs, he explains, encourage the blood to web together, medical logic that's both completely wrong and accidentally somewhat antimicrobial, since medieval spiders at least weren't covered in pig blood. Now then, he announces, wiping his bloody hands on his apron with satisfaction, you'll need to rest for, the time it takes to say 3 paternosters, then moderate exercise to encourage new blood production. I recommend wrestling. Gets the heart pumping nicely. The fact that you can barely lift your head, let alone wrestle anyone, doesn't seem to factor into his treatment plan. He leaves you with detailed instructions that contradict everything your mother-in-law suggested earlier. No onions, they'll thicken the blood. No lying down, traps the humours. And definitely no more leeches for at least a day. They might get confused by the new blood and suck out the good stuff. Your wife dutifully notes all this while shooting worried glances at your increasingly pale complexion. The door barely closes behind William before it opens again to admit a far more prestigious visitor, Master Theodoric, an actual university-trained physician. He sweeps in wearing the long black robes of his profession, carrying an astrolabe, several leather-bound books, and an air of superiority that could suffocate a horse. Your wife has spent your last good silver to summon him, hoping real education might succeed where folk wisdom and enthusiastic bloodletting have failed. I see the barber has been here. Theodoric sniffs, examining the bloody bowls with obvious disdain. Crude butchery, no consideration for the celestial influences. He produces an elaborate chart from his satchel, unrolling it to reveal a human figure surrounded by zodiac symbols, planetary orbits, and incomprehensible Latin annotations. This is cutting-edge medieval medicine, the marriage of astronomy and anatomy that universities insist makes perfect sense. Without even glancing at you, he begins calculating. The astrolabe spins in his hands as he mutters about degrees and houses, occasionally consulting an ephemeris table that tracks planetary positions. Born under Scorpio, were you? During a waning moon? This changes everything. The fact that you were actually born under Gemini doesn't seem worth mentioning when he's this invested in his calculations. The problem, he announces after several minutes of stellar mathematics, is clearly Saturn's malign influence on your liver. See here. He points to his chart where Saturn is apparently doing something suspicious near a drawing of intestines. The Lord of Melancholy has been in opposition to your natal Jupiter for 3 days. No wonder you're suffering from corrupted yellow bile. Your mother-in-law, who's been hovering skeptically, dares to ask how exactly Saturn, located millions of miles away, affects your liver specifically. Theodoric launches into a lecture about celestial sympathies, explaining how each planet governs specific organs through invisible emanations. It's the medieval equivalent of quantum healing, using real astronomical terms to justify medical nonsense with such confidence that questioning it seems foolish. He produces another chart, this one showing the best times for various treatments based on planetary hours. Apparently, Mercury rules the first hour after sunrise on Wednesdays, making it ideal for treating fevers. Venus governs Friday evenings, perfect for love potions and rashes. The connection remains unclear. Your current illness, he declares, requires treatment during Mars's hour, but only when the moon is waxing in an air sign. Fortunately, he says, consulting his tables again, Mars rules the third hour after noon today. We have a narrow window for treatment. He begins preparing his prescribed remedy, a powder made from ground pearls. Mercury, because apparently everyone in medieval medicine is obsessed with poisoning people with quicksilver, and something he calls celestial salt, but looks suspiciously like regular salt with herbs mixed in. The real theatre begins when he starts the actual treatment ritual. He arranges 12 candles around your bed in a pattern supposedly mirroring the zodiac. Each candle, he explains, must be lit in a specific order while reciting incantations that blend medical Latin with what sounds like pure gibberish. Your wife watches with the desperate hope of someone who's paid too much to admit this might be nonsense. Now, Theodoric says, pulling out a small crystal vial. This contains water collected during the last lunar eclipse, mixed with powdered sapphire and tincture of gold. Very rare, very expensive. He places 3 drops on your forehead while tracing astrological symbols. The water is lukewarm and smells faintly of pond scum, suggesting the lunar eclipse collection might have involved the town well at midnight. He then examines you for the first time, though examine is generous. He studies your palm lines, checks the shape of your skull, and peers intently at your earlobes. Classic signs of Saturnine influence, he mutters. The lifeline curves toward Venus, indicating romantic complications affecting the spleen. And these earlobes, definitely too attached. Clear marker of melancholic tendencies. Historians still debate whether medieval physicians genuinely believed in astrological medicine or simply used it to justify their fees. The answer seems to be both. The university system taught astronomical calculation as legitimate medical practice, while also encouraging elaborate consultations that justified higher prices. Theodoric certainly seems invested in his cosmic diagnoses, even as he carefully ensures each consultation takes exactly 1 expensive hour. The treatment intensifies when he produces his prized possession, a magnetic stone supposedly aligned with celestial forces. He waves it over your body in patterns that correspond to planetary orbits, occasionally pausing to check his charts and adjust the angle. Feel that? He asks, when you shiver from the fever. That's Mars leaving your blood. Very good sign. Your symptoms, meanwhile, continue unabated. The rash has spread to your neck. Your throat feels like molten lead, and the room won't stop spinning. But Theodoric declares improvement based solely on the fact that Jupiter has moved 3 degrees since his arrival. He prescribes a complex regimen involving prayers at specific planetary hours, dietary restrictions based on your birth chart, and wearing an amulet containing mercury, sulfur, and a dove's heart. The critical thing, he concludes, rolling up his charts with satisfaction, is maintaining cosmic balance. No hot foods when the sun is in fire signs, no cold baths during lunar water phases, and absolutely no bloodletting until Mars exits your 7th house. The barber surgeon clearly didn't check this, which explains why you're still suffering. Your wife clutches the prescription Theodoric left behind, a scroll of parchment covered in symbols that look more like demons summoning instructions than medical advice. The apothecary shop of Master Giles sits at the end of Pudding Lane, Its painted sign depicting a unicorn fighting a dragon over what appears to be a medicine bottle. The symbolism is lost on you. But then again, so is most of medieval pharmaceutical theory. Inside, the shop assaults every sense simultaneously. Dried crocodiles hang from the ceiling, imported from Egypt, supposedly full of healing essence. Jars of mysterious floating objects line the walls, preserved toads, pickled snakes, something that might be a human finger, but could optimistically be a root vegetable. The smell combines rotting herbs, sulfur, and something sweet that makes your stomach turn even worse than it already is. Master Giles emerges from the back room like an alchemical scarecrow, thin and bent from years of inhaling his own concoctions. His eyes water constantly, his fingers are stained every color of the rainbow, and he has a persistent twitch that suggests sampling the merchandise isn't always voluntary. "Ah, Master Theodoric's patient," he says, recognizing the prescription format. "Let's see what miracles we're working today." He studies the prescription through a magnifying lens made from crystal, supposedly blessed by 3 bishops to enhance its medical properties. Powdered unicorn horn. Yes, standard. Mummy powder. I've just got a fresh shipment from Venice, real Egyptian. Not like that local corpse dust some shops sell. The casual discussion of ground-up human remains as medicine makes you seriously reconsider every life choice that led to this moment. The preparation process is equal parts chemistry and theatre. Giles measures ingredients on a scale so delicate he claims it can weigh human souls, though he admits business in that area is slow. He adds a pinch of ground pearls, explaining they contain concentrated moonlight, a dash of mercury because, as he notes cheerfully, nothing purges corruption quite like quicksilver. The fact that it also purges life from bodies doesn't seem to concern anyone. "Now, the secret ingredient," he whispers conspiratorially, producing a vial of clear liquid. Virgin's tears. Very difficult to source, very expensive. Some say it's just rose water, but they lack faith in traditional medicine. He adds 3 drops with the reverence of a priest handling holy water. Though you're pretty sure you saw his apprentice filling similar vials from the rain barrel outside. The real horror show begins when he starts adding the animal ingredients: powdered stag's heart for vitality, dried bat wings for night vision, apparently a common side effect of fever, and something he calls dragon's blood, but admits might just be really old tree resin. Each edition comes with a story about its medicinal properties, usually involving ancient Greeks or biblical figures who supposedly lived to impossible ages thanks to these exact ingredients. The mummy powder is particularly fine this batch, Giles notes, adding a generous spoonful of what looks like dirt but costs more than your house. You can tell by the way it sparkles. That's the preservation salts the Egyptians used. Full of life force. The grotesque irony of using ground-up dead people to promote life force seems lost on everyone except you. He moves to the live ingredients section, where things get progressively worse. Your prescription apparently calls for oil of scorpions, which involves drowning live scorpions in olive oil while they're still thrashing. Has to be done during the full moon, Giles explains. Dropping writhing arachnids into a jar. Otherwise the venom won't properly infuse. The resulting oil smells like death, and Olive Tapenade had an unfortunate baby. Next comes the bezoar stone, a hardened mass from a goat's stomach that supposedly cures all poisons. Giles shows you his premium selection, ranging from pebble size to something approaching a small melon. This one came from a goat that ate only medicinal herbs. He claims about a particularly expensive specimen. You can taste the healing properties. He actually licks it to demonstrate, immediately triggering your gag reflex. The mixing process involves equipment that belongs in either a kitchen or a torture chamber. He grinds ingredients with a mortar and pestle made from virgin marble. Marble quarried by virgins. Marble that's never been used. The details remain vague. Some components need to be heated over a flame-colored green with copper salts. Others must be cooled with ice imported from mountain peaks and stored in the cellar. Temperature is crucial, Giles explains. Adding mouse droppings, for fertility of recovery, to the growing mixture. Too hot and you'll cook the healing essence. Too cold and the humours won't activate. I once had a customer who heated their medicine over a regular fire, turned his urine blue for a month. This cautionary tale is presumably meant to be reassuring. The financial discussion that follows is almost as painful as your symptoms. Each ingredient carries a cost that would make a merchant weep. The unicorn horn, narwhal tusk, alone cost 2 months' wages. The mummy powder is priced by the grain. The virgin's tears apparently require a virgin. Tears, and a significant markup. Your wife counts out coins with shaking hands, while Giles itemizes each component with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely believes he's providing life-saving medicine rather than expensive poison. The parish priest, Father Benedict, arrives as the sun reaches its zenith, clutching his leather satchel of holy implements and wearing an expression that suggests he's already decided your illness is more spiritual than physical. He's a thin man with nervous hands that constantly fidget with his wooden cross, and his Latin is questionable at best, a product of rural religious education where enthusiasm matters more than accuracy. I can sense the demonic presence from the threshold, he announces, despite still being in your doorway. Your wife crosses herself reflexively, while your mother-in-law nods knowingly, vindicated in her earlier suspicions about supernatural involvement. The fact that you're covered in mysterious rashes, bleeding from various medical interventions, and drugged with enough mercury to kill a horse apparently screams demon possession, rather than victim of medieval healthcare. Father Benedict begins his examination by checking for the devil's marks. He peers at your rash with the intensity of someone who's definitely going to find what he's looking for. See here. He points to a perfectly ordinary mole, the devil's kiss, and these pustules form a pattern, possibly Hebrew letters spelling out blasphemies. The pattern looks more like random skin inflammation to you, but questioning religious authority, while possibly possessed, seems unwise. He produces his tools of spiritual warfare, a vial of holy water, blessed last Easter, he assures everyone, though it smells suspiciously stale, a wooden crucifix worn smooth from handling, and a book of exorcism, prayers written in Latin, so corrupted by centuries of copying that it's essentially become its own language. The book's margins are filled with crude drawings of demons that look like someone described the concept of evil to a child with artistic ambitions. We must determine which demon afflicts you, Father Benedict explains, flipping through his manual. Each has its own preferences and weaknesses. Beelzebub favors the stomach. Asmodeus attacks through lust. Belphegor through sloth. He studies your symptoms against his demonology chart, trying to match your fever and rash to the appropriate infernal entity. It's like a medical diagnosis, but with more sulfur and damnation. The questioning begins with your recent activities. Have you had impure thoughts? Who hasn't? Eaten meat on a fast day? Possibly. You've lost track. Walked widdershins around a church? not intentionally. Each answer is weighed against his catalogue of sins that invite demonic possession. Apparently, that time you grumbled about tithing last month might have opened a spiritual doorway for Satan's minions. The demon is clearly lodged in your throat. Father Benedict declares after you cough. That's why it burns, hellfire trying to escape. We must draw it out through the mouth before it burrows deeper. His assistant, a pimply youth named Thomas, who looks like he'd rather be anywhere else, begins arranging candles in what's supposedly a protective circle, but resembles more of a fire hazard. The exorcism ritual starts with Father Benedict splashing holy water liberally around the room. Most of it hits you in the face, which burns your fevered skin and makes you flinch. "See how the demon recoils from blessed water," he cries triumphantly. Your mother-in-law suggests adding salt to enhance the effect, because apparently seasoning is important in spiritual warfare as well as cooking. The Latin incantations that follow would be impressive if they weren't so mangled. Father Benedict stumbles over pronunciations, occasionally lapsing into what sounds like personal commentary in English before catching himself. "Demon, exit us from this. Corpus, immediately us." His confidence in the power of adding us to English words when Latin fails him is admirable if linguistically painful. Things escalate when he decides physical intervention is necessary. He presses the crucifix against your forehead hard enough to leave a mark, commanding the demon to reveal its name. Your fevered mumbling is interpreted as infernal speech. "It speaks in tongues," Father Benedict shouts, though you're pretty sure you just asked for water. Thomas dutifully writes down your demonic utterances for later study. The real theatrical peak comes when Father Benedict produces his secret weapon, a relic he claims is a splinter from the true cross. The fact that enough true cross fragments exist in Europe to build a small forest doesn't diminish his faith in this particular splinter. He waves it over your body while chanting, occasionally pausing to blow on it, as if that somehow activates its holy powers. "I see the demon weakening," he announces, after an hour of Latin gibberish and aggressive blessing. Your exhaustion from the ordeal is taken as evidence of spiritual victory, rather than the natural result of being shouted at by an enthusiastic priest. He prescribes a regimen of daily prayers, fasting, because clearly what you need while ill is less nutrition, and wearing a hair shirt to mortify the flesh that invited demonic attention. The bill for this spiritual intervention is presented as a donation to the church, but the amount suggested makes it clear that exorcism is a lucrative business. Your wife pays, while Father Benedict assures her that any remaining demonic influence will fade with sufficient prayer and perhaps another session next week. The fact that you're still visibly ill is attributed to residual demon damage rather than the complete failure of his intervention. The next morning brings a new level of medical humiliation as the town physicians decide your case requires public consultation. You're loaded onto a cart like a sack of diseased grain, every bump in the cobblestones sending fresh waves of agony through your bloodlet arm and mercury-poisoned gut. The destination is the market square, where apparently medical examinations become spectator sport on Thursdays. A platform has been erected near the stocks, usually reserved for punishing petty criminals, but today serving as your medical theatre. 3 physicians in full academic regalia wait like judges at a particularly unfortunate trial. Master Hugh, Master Roland, and Master Francis, collectively possessing 12 years of university education and 0 practical sense, adjust their elaborate hats while townspeople gather to watch your degradation. Bring forth the patient, Master Hugh intones, as if you're not already visible to half the town. Strong arms haul you onto the platform where you're propped against a wooden frame, displayed like a prize cow at auction. The crowd presses closer. Vendors pause their hawking to watch, and children climb onto parents' shoulders for a better view of whatever horrors are about to unfold. The examination begins with the physicians circling you like vultures in velvet robes, discussing your case in Latin to maintain professional mystique. Occasionally, they lapse into French when they think something particularly damning, not realizing half the crowd understands both languages better than they speak them. Observe the pustules, Master Roland announces, poking your rash with a stick he probably uses to discipline students. Classic case of melancholic overflow, Master Francis declares to the crowd, launching into a lecture about humoral theory. He uses you as a living diagram, pointing out where each humor has supposedly gone wrong. Your blackened fingernails indicate corrupted blood. Your pale complexion shows phlegmatic excess, and your general misery proves bile imbalance. It's medicine as performance art, with you as the unwilling canvas. The real circus begins when they invite questions from the audience. A baker suggests your illness stems from eating competitors' bread, clearly cursed. A fishwife insists she's seen similar symptoms in mackerel, recommending you be packed in salt. The town drunk shouts that more ale would sort you right out, which honestly sounds better than anything the physicians have suggested so far. Master Hugh decides to demonstrate proper diagnostic technique for the education of onlookers. He examines your tongue, pulling it out far enough that you gag, while he discusses its coating like a wine expert describing vintages. Note the yellow film indicating heated bile, the swollen papillae suggesting gastric rebellion. The crowd nods sagely, as if any of them know what papillae are. Meanwhile, entrepreneurial merchants set up stalls around the platform, selling miracle cures to the gathered crowd. Same medicine the physicians use, one shouts, waving bottles that definitely weren't made by any licensed apothecary. Cured my cousin's plague, another claims, about a tonic that smells like fermented cabbage. Your public humiliation has become a marketing opportunity for every quack within shouting distance. The physicians produce their own competing theories for the crowd's consideration. Master Roland favors planetary misalignment combined with moral failings. Master Francis insists it's clearly an imbalance of hot and cold humors requiring opposite treatments. Master Hugh, not to be outdone, diagnoses a rare condition he's just invented called mercantile fever, supposedly caught from handling too much foreign currency. We shall demonstrate the knife test, Master Francis announces, producing a blade that hasn't seen cleaning since the conquest. He makes small cuts on your already abused arm, studying how the blood flows like he's reading tarot cards. The crowd presses closer, some offering their own interpretations of what the blood patterns mean. One woman swears she sees the face of St. Anthony in the droplets. The competing miracle cure sellers grow more aggressive as the examination continues. Fights break out between rival medicine merchants, each claiming their competitor sells false remedies. A particularly enterprising vendor starts taking bets on whether you'll survive the week, offering odds that shift based on each physician's pronouncement. Your medical crisis has become a full market day entertainment. The physicians, aware they're losing the crowd's attention to commerce, escalate their demonstrations. They check your reflexes by hitting you with increasingly large implements. They examine your urine. William thankfully saved a sample. With the theatrical flair of stage magicians, Master Hugh even produces a magnifying glass to examine your skin, gasping dramatically at whatever he pretends to see. The patient clearly requires aggressive intervention. They finally conclude in unison, having argued themselves into agreement through sheer exhaustion. Their prescribed treatment combines all their theories: bloodletting during specific planetary hours, purging with exotic herbs, applications of hot and cold compresses in alternating patterns that would challenge a professional dancer, and dietary restrictions so complex they require an astronomical calendar to follow. The crowd begins dispersing, having gotten their entertainment and purchased their dubious cures. You're loaded back onto the cart, now the proud owner of 3 competing diagnoses, a dozen new prescriptions, and the distinction of being the day's best free show. A small boy throws a rotten apple that misses you, but hits Master Hugh, which provides the only moment of satisfaction in an otherwise mortifying experience. The word trepanation enters your fevered consciousness like a death knell as the physicians huddle in your bedroom, debating whether drilling into your skull might release the evil vapors they're now convinced are trapped inside. Master Hugh produces a leather case with the reverence of a priest unveiling holy relics, revealing an array of drilling implements that would make a carpenter jealous, if carpenters specialized in making holes in living human heads. The procedure has excellent classical precedent. Master Roland explains to your horrified wife, unrolling a scroll depicting ancient skulls with neat holes bored through them. Hippocrates himself recommended it for persistent head pains. See here. He points to crude drawings of smiling patients having their skulls opened. The release of pressure brings immediate relief. The fact that these drawings show no blood, screaming, or death suggests artistic license rather than medical accuracy. The trepanning drill itself is a masterpiece of medieval engineering, a hand-cranked device with interchangeable bits ranging from delicate to, dear God, why does that exist? Master Francis polishes the cutting edges with a cloth that's seen better days, explaining how the circular motion prevents the blade from catching on bone fragments. Your mother-in-law, usually eager for any medical intervention, actually takes a step backward. The key is location. Master Hugh lectures, producing yet another chart. This one showing a human head divided into sections like a butcher's diagram. Too far forward, and we risk the seat of reason. Too far back endangers the animal spirits. The sweet spot. He taps your skull experimentally, making you flinch, is right here, where the melancholic vapors gather. His confidence in vapor geography is matched only by your certainty that this is how you die. They begin preparing the surgical theatre, which in this case means clearing a space on your bedroom floor and laying down straw to catch the inevitable blood. Thomas, Father Benedict's assistant, who's apparently apprenticing with everyone today, starts sharpening the drill bits with the enthusiasm of someone who won't be on the receiving end. The grinding sound of metal on stone makes your teeth ache in sympathy for your soon-to-be ventilated skull. We'll need to shave the area first, Master Francis announces, producing sheep shears that definitely weren't cleaned after their last use. Your protests are interpreted as demon resistance rather than rational fear of having your head opened like a boiled egg. They compromise by only shaving a palm-sized circle, leaving you looking like a monk who got distracted halfway through tonsuring. The debate over anesthesia is brief and terrifying. Master Roland suggests a blow to the head to induce unconsciousness, which Master Hugh vetoes on grounds it might drive the vapors deeper. They settle on a combination of poppy juice and strong wine. mixed with something Master Francis calls drowsy powder, but looks suspiciously like regular dirt. The resulting mixture tastes like liquid death and does nothing for your pain, but makes the room spin faster. Your wife attempts one last intervention, suggesting perhaps prayer might be preferable to perforation. The physicians dismiss this with the patronizing agreement of professionals humoring the layperson. Prayer is excellent for the soul, Master Hugh concedes, but trapped vapors require physical release. Think of it like lancing a boil. But for the brain, this analogy does nothing to comfort anyone, least of all you. The actual drilling preparation involves more ritual than surgery. They mark the spot with charcoal blessed by Father Benedict, who's returned to provide spiritual support or last rites as needed. Master Roland consults his astronomical charts one final time, confirming that Jupiter's position won't interfere with cranial penetration. It's medical theatre, where you're both audience and stage. The patient must remain absolutely still, Master Francis warns, gesturing for Thomas and two burly servants to hold you down. Any movement could cause the drill to slip and damage the thinking parts. The casual admission that they might accidentally lobotomize you while trying to release imaginary vapors perfectly encapsulates medieval medical confidence. Just as Master Hugh positions the drill against your newly shaved scalp, salvation arrives in the form of violent interruption. Your neighbor bursts through the door, screaming about his prize sow showing similar symptoms to yours: rash, fever, general distress. The physicians freeze mid-craniotomy, suddenly very interested in comparative pathology that doesn't involve drilling through bone. A pig, you say? Master Roland abandons your skull to interrogate the neighbor, with pustules and fever. The revelation that livestock might share your symptoms throws their entire demonic vapor theory into chaos. Demons generally don't possess pigs, biblical precedent notwithstanding, and vapor accumulation in pig skulls isn't documented in their medical texts. The physicians excuse themselves for an emergency consultation, leaving you strapped to the impromptu surgical table with a target drawn on your head. Your wife quickly unbinds you while your mother-in-law hides the trepanning kit. Both women united in preventing your skull from becoming a wind instrument. The news of sick pigs spreads quickly, drawing the physicians into a heated debate about whether animal and human illnesses can be related, a revolutionary concept they're not prepared to accept. By the time they return, you've been relocated to your bed and the surgical equipment mysteriously vanished. The physicians, now distracted by the theological implications of cross-species disease transmission, declare trepanation postponed pending further investigation. Your skull remains intact through sheer porcine providence, though the charcoal mark serves as a reminder of how close you came to medieval brain surgery. The wise woman arrives at midnight, because of course she does. Nothing says legitimate medical care like sneaking through darkened streets to avoid church authorities. Goodwife Marjorie, as she's known to those brave enough to seek her services, looks exactly like you'd expect: wild grey hair, knowing eyes, and hands stained green from a lifetime of crushing herbs. Your wife let her in through the back door after the physician's trepanation attempt proved the final straw. Men and their tools, Marjorie mutters, examining the charcoal target still decorating your scalp, always wanting to cut and bleed and drill. Sometimes the old ways work better. She produces a leather satchel that smells of earth and growing things, infinitely preferable to the mercury and mummy powder combinations you've been choking down. Her examination technique differs radically from the physician's. She actually touches you, feeling the heat of your skin, the rhythm of your pulse, the texture of your rash. Feverfew might help, she muses, though this looks more like wool poisoning than demon possession. The suggestion that your illness might have a mundane cause rather than supernatural origin is revolutionary enough to make your mother-in-law clutch her cross. Marjorie begins preparing her remedies with the practiced efficiency of someone who actually knows what they're doing. She crushes willow bark, which contains actual salicylic acid, though she doesn't know that, mixing it with honey and wine. For the pain and fever, she explains, spooning it into your mouth. It tastes bitter, but lacks the metallic horror of mercury-based medicines. The rash is interesting, she continues, producing a salve that smells of calendula and something earthy. See how it clusters, like when the tanners get lye burns, but different. You haven't been handling new cloth, have you? Your wife mentions the shipment of wool from Flanders you inspected last week, and Marjorie nods knowingly. Foreign wool carries foreign troubles. Seen it before. The remedies she applies actually feel soothing rather than like additional torture. The salve cools your burning skin. The willow bark tea eases your headache, and her gentle ministrations lack the violent enthusiasm of your previous healers. She even produces a tonic for your stomach, ravaged by days of purgatives and poison, simple ginger and peppermint that actually settles rather than upheavals. The danger, Marjorie whispers, glancing at the door. Isn't your illness but the cure, mercury powder? Might as well drink molten lead, and drilling holes in heads. She shakes her head disgustedly. Lost my sister to a physician who thought her headaches needed ventilation. Brain fever took her within the day. This practical experience with medical mortality gives her opinions weight the university men lack. She tells you about her training, learned not in Latin texts but from her grandmother, who learned from hers, an unbroken chain of women keeping ancient knowledge alive. Before the priests came, before their universities and rules, we knew which plants healed and which harmed. But now, she makes a warding gesture. Call it witchcraft and burn us for knowing chamomile eases stomach pains. Your mother-in-law, surprisingly, warms to Marjorie's approach. They bond over shared knowledge of household remedies, comparing recipes for poultices and arguing good-naturedly about whether cobwebs or egg whites better stem bleeding. It's the first medical consultation you've witnessed that involves actual discussion rather than authoritative pronouncement. The church physicians won't like you consulting me, Marjorie warns, preparing to leave before dawn. They've already accused 2 wise women in the next county of consorting with devils, as if the devil cares about curing children's cough or easing birth pains. The bitterness in her voice speaks to generations of knowledge suppressed by theological authority. She leaves you with simple instructions. Continue the willow bark tea. Apply the salve twice daily. Eat bland foods until your stomach settles. And avoid any treatment involving heavy metals, drilling, or demons. Your body wants to heal, she explains. Sometimes the best medicine is not making things worse. This revolutionary concept of doing no harm would be heretical if suggested by anyone with formal medical training. The improvement is noticeable within hours. Your fever drops to manageable levels. The rash stops spreading, and your stomach finally unclenches from its mercury-induced knots. But you can't publicly credit Marjorie without risking accusation of consorting with witches. So your wife tells neighbors you're following a new regimen of prayer and fasting. If you worsen, send word through the baker's wife. Marjorie instructed before leaving. She knows how to reach me, but be careful. The church is watching. And healing without license is becoming dangerous. The fact that effective medicine must hide while licensed poisoning operates openly, perfectly captures medieval healthcare's twisted priorities. Your mother-in-law saves some of Marjorie's salve, hiding it carefully among her cooking herbs. For next time, she says pragmatically, though we'll tell the priests it's goose grease blessed by St. Bridget if anyone asks. This medical underground of wise women and practical healers operates parallel to official medicine, often more successfully, but always at risk. The monastery of St. Bartholomew serves as the town's hospital, though hospital generously describes what amounts to a warehouse for the dying. You arrive on a donated cart, your brief improvement from Marjorie's treatments overshadowed by the physician's insistence that proper Christian healing requires monastic supervision. The building looms grey and forbidding, its windows narrow as suspicious eyes. Brother Infirmara Jerome greets you at the door, with the exhausted look of someone who's seen too much death, and blames most of it on sin. Another fever case, he sighs, not bothering to examine you before assigning a bed. Third this week. Must be God's judgment for the town's wickedness. This cheerful theological diagnosis bodes well for your recovery prospects. The ward stretches before you like a vision of purgatory. 2 long rows of beds crammed so close together, you could hold hands with patients on either side if anyone felt remotely companionable. The air thick with incense barely masks the underlying stench of unwashed bodies, untreated wounds, and the distinctive smell of death hovering like an unwelcome relative. Your bed, a straw-stuffed mattress that's seen better decades, already contains an occupant. Scoot over, Brother Jerome commands the barely conscious man, who obligingly rolls to one side. Beds are for 2, sometimes 3 if God sends many souls for testing. The concept of disease transmission through proximity hasn't occurred to anyone, though you notice the sickest patients do tend to cluster together in efficient little death pools. Your bedmate, when lucid enough to speak, introduces himself as Robert the Miller. He's been here 6 days with a cough that sounds like gravel in a butter churn. Started same as you, he wheezes, rash and fever, but the brother's treatment drove it to my chest. His rash has indeed disappeared, replaced by a complexion the colour of old cheese and breathing that rattles the bed frame. The monastic medical routine begins at matins, when you're awakened for mandatory prayer, sick or dying. Everyone capable of movement shuffles to the chapel. Those too weak pray from their beds while brothers swing censers of incense thick enough to choke healthy lungs. The theory is spiritual healing through constant worship, though mostly it seems to exhaust already depleted patients. Treatment consists primarily of bloodletting, because apparently you haven't lost enough blood yet. Purgatives, your stomach clenches at the memory, and applied prayer. Brother Jerome's special edition is dietary therapy. Patients receive bread soaked in holy water and vegetables boiled until they surrender any nutritional value. Meat is forbidden, as too stimulating for the ill, though you notice the brother's kitchen smells suspiciously of roasted chicken. The real horror is the communal nature of everything. 1 bucket of water serves multiple patients for washing. Bloodletting bowls get a cursory rinse between uses. The same spoon delivers medicine to every mouth in sequence. It's less healing sanctuary and more efficient disease exchange program, with each patient sampling their neighbor's ailments like some grotesque medical potluck. Night brings its own terrors. Patients cry out in fever dreams, creating a chorus of misery that prevents rest. The man 2 beds down begins convulsing at Compline, thrashing so violently the brothers tie him to the bed frame. By Lord's, he's still and cold, covered with a sheet to await morning burial. His bed remains empty exactly long enough for brothers to flip the mattress before installing a new occupant. Your fever returns with vengeance in this pestilent environment. Robert's cough proves contagious, and soon you're hacking alongside him in wheezing harmony. A new rash appears, different from your original, possibly borrowed from the woman across the aisle who scratches constantly. The monastery is efficient at many things, but primarily at ensuring no one leaves with only their original ailment. It's God's will, Brother Jerome explains, when you weakly protest the communal cup of medicine that tastes like it's already been through several digestive systems. Suffering purifies the soul. Would you refuse Christ's cup? This theological manipulation makes refusing treatment equivalent to heresy. So you drink whatever horrors they present and pray it kills you quickly. The death rate speaks for itself. During your first 3 days, 6 beds empty permanently. The brothers carry bodies out with practiced efficiency, chanting prayers that have become routine through repetition. Fresh patients arrive to fill vacant spots before the straws even changed, creating an endless cycle of suffering that would impress even the darkest medieval imagination. Historians debate whether monastic hospitals helped or harmed overall mortality rates. The answer seems to be yes. They provided shelter and basic care for those with nowhere else to go, while simultaneously creating perfect conditions for disease transmission. The brothers mean well, but good intentions pave the road to medical hell when combined with zero understanding of contagion. A wealthy merchant arrives on your 4th day, installing himself in the private chamber reserved for generous donors. He receives individual attention, fresh bedding, better food, and mysteriously recovers within the week. The correlation between survival rates and donation size goes unmentioned, but not unnoticed by ward patients watching another poor soul carried out feet first. You realize with growing certainty that staying here means joining the morning burial processional. When your wife visits at the permitted hour, you beg her to take you home. Better to die in my own bed than share a stranger's grave, you whisper, your voice now raspy from Robert's contributed cough. She nods, understanding that monastic medicine might save your soul while efficiently killing your body. The word plague ripples through the ward like wind through wheat, starting with whispers and building to barely contain panic. A merchant from the port arrived yesterday with telltale black swellings in his neck. And now Brother Jerome stands at the foot of your bed with an expression that manages to combine holy resignation with earthly terror. We must consider the possibility of pestilence, he announces, as if the consideration hasn't been haunting everyone since the merchant started screaming about demons in his lymph nodes. The transformation of the monastery hospital from mere death trap to official plague ward happens with frightening efficiency. Brothers who yesterday insisted suffering purified the soul now cover their faces with vinegar-soaked cloths and handle patients with long poles. The communal cup disappears, replaced by the policy of leaving water just out of reach, so the infected must struggle for it, minimizing contact with the healthy. Your symptoms don't match plague exactly. No black swellings, no blood in your spit, but in the current atmosphere of panic, diagnostic precision matters less than preventive isolation. A red cross appears on the wall above your bed, marking you as potentially pestilent. Robert the Miller, whose cough has worsened to wet, productive hacking, gets his own cross despite protesting. He's had this condition since grain dust first met his lungs 20 years ago. 40 days, Brother Jerome intones, explaining the quarantine rules with the gravity of reading last rites. None may enter or leave the pestilence ward for 40 days. Food will be left at the threshold. Pray for your souls. The biblical significance of 40 days isn't lost on anyone. Christ in the desert, Noah's flood, and now your medical imprisonment, all sharing the same mystical duration. The isolation ward is actually the same ward with added theological terror. They hang sheets between beds, creating fabric walls that do nothing to stop disease, but everything to increase claustrophobia. Incense burns constantly now, thick enough to make breathing difficult for healthy lungs. Never mind your compromised respiratory system. The theory is that sweet smoke combats pestilential vapors, though mainly it makes everyone cough more. Your wife arrives for visiting hour to find the monastery doors barred. Her wails penetrate the stone walls as brothers explain that seeing you would risk spreading plague throughout the town. They allow her to leave food and medicine at the gate, where it sits for hours before anyone brave enough retrieves it. Half the packages disappear between gate and ward, claimed by brothers as distribution tax or simply stolen by the desperate. The plague paranoia creates its own symptoms. Every ache becomes a potential bubo. Every cough signals respiratory plague. Every fever dreams of dancing skeletons. The merchant who started the panic dies on day 3. His black swellings proven to be infected rat bites gone septic. But by then the quarantine machinery has momentum. Easier to let 40 days pass than admit error and risk actual plague arriving while guards are down. Treatment for suspected plague makes previous medical tortures seem gentle. Brother Jerome prescribes constant prayer, naturally, but also fumigation with burning herbs that make your eyes stream. You're forced to drink vinegar mixed with crushed emeralds, actually just green glass, but priced like gems, supposedly to neutralize plague vapors in your stomach. The resulting acidic agony would make anyone pray for death's sweet release. The real plague victims arrive on day 7, a family of tanners who definitely have the telltale swellings and bloody cough. They're installed in beds recently vacated by death, their moans adding new harmonies to the ward's symphony of suffering. Watching true plague victims makes you realize your own illness, however miserable, lacks the grotesque theater of actual pestilence. See how God tests us. Brother Jerome sermonizes during mandatory prayer, careful to stand upwind of the congregation. Some with false plague to try their faith, others with true plague to purify their souls. This theological distinction between your suffering and the tanner's suffering escapes you. But apparently, God's medical coding system makes perfect sense to monastic minds. The quarantine creates its own ecosystem of horror. Without proper cleaning, the ward descends into squalor that would disgust a stable boy. Rats grow bold, stealing food and investigating weakened patients. One memorable night, you wake to find a rat gnawing on poor Robert's infected toe, which he can't feel due to advanced fever. The brothers declare this God's creatures reclaiming corrupted flesh, missing the irony of plague-carrying rodents in a plague ward. Food quality, never stellar, degrades to cruel mockery. Bread arrives moldy, water tastes of metal, and the daily pottage might be vegetable soup or dishwater, impossible to tell through the vinegar fumes. The brothers claim fasting aids spiritual healing, conveniently explaining why patients receive starvation rations, while smoke from the brothers' kitchen carries scents of roasted meat. By day 15, half the ward is empty through death or miraculous recovery, fleeing in the night. You've survived through pure stubbornness and the herbal remedies your wife smuggled in before quarantine. The actual plague victims died within days, proving your diagnosis wrong but leaving you trapped by bureaucratic momentum. 25 more days of imprisonment stretch ahead like purgatory's antechamber. The psychological toll of quarantine rivals the physical suffering. Patients who arrived with minor ailments develop full-blown madness from confinement. One man becomes convinced he's already dead and refuses food, arguing corpses don't need sustenance. Another starts seeing angels in the incense smoke, providing running commentary on heavenly activities that would be heretical if anyone took him seriously. By day 30 of quarantine, desperation drives even the faithful to consider extreme measures. Your mother-in-law arrives at the monastery gates with news of a miraculous cure. The thigh bone of St. Agatha, recently arrived at Canterbury Cathedral, is healing everything from plague to pox. 3 days' journey, she shouts through the barred door. But merchants say the blind see and the lame dance after touching it. The promise of miracle cure finally provides escape justification from this medical prison. Brother Jerome initially refuses release, citing 6 more days of holy isolation. But your wife employs the ultimate medieval argument: donation. A pouch of silver mysteriously appears in monastery coffers, and suddenly your pilgrimage becomes divinely inspired rather than quarantine breaking. God works in mysterious ways, Brother Jerome mutters, counting coins while drafting your official travel papers. The preparation for pilgrimage involves its own medical rituals. You must be purified before approaching holy relics, which means more bloodletting to cleanse corruption, more purgatives to empty worldly concerns, and a special blessing involving enough incense to suffocate a horse. By the time you're declared spiritually ready to travel, you can barely stand. But apparently, that's ideal pilgrim condition, humble and broken before God's mercy. Your traveling party assembles like a medical circus troupe. There's you, barely able to walk, Robert the Miller, whose cough has become his defining personality trait, a merchant's wife covered in mysterious boils, and 2 farmers convinced they have leprosy despite showing no symptoms beyond sunburn. Your mother-in-law organizes the expedition with military efficiency, hiring a cart and driver willing to transport potentially diseased passengers for triple the usual rate. The first day's journey covers 12 miles and nearly kills half the party. Every pothole feels like divine punishment, every hill like Calvary. You stop at roadside shrines where local entrepreneurs sell healing water blessed by the same spring St. Agatha drank from. Though the stream in question probably didn't exist in St. Agatha's era, she being from Sicily and this being Kent, roadside medical care proves even worse than monastery treatment. One inn offers to cure your fever with a treatment involving live eels placed on your chest to draw out water humours. Another suggests sleeping in their stable because horse breath cures human ailments, neglecting to mention the stable hasn't been mucked in weeks. You stick with Marjorie's herbs, secretly passed by your wife, while publicly performing whatever ridiculous ritual locals recommend. The pilgrimage road attracts medical entrepreneurs like flies to honey. Every crossroads features someone selling miraculous cures. Water from Thomas Becket's well. Every well within 50 miles of Canterbury claims this distinction. Threads from saints' robes, remarkably abundant for people who supposedly lived in poverty, and enough splinters of the true cross to build a modest chapel. Your mother-in-law haggles fiercely, convinced that saint-touched items shouldn't cost more than regular blessed objects. Fellow pilgrims share horror stories that make your experience seem pleasant. A tanner from London describes physician-prescribed treatment involving being buried up to his neck in hot sand while ravens pecked at his exposed head, to draw out evil thoughts causing bodily corruption. A fishwife recounts paying her life savings for powdered saint's bone that turned out to be ground chalk, though she insists it cured her anyway through faith alone. The journey becomes its own illness. Sleeping rough aggravates every symptom. Questionable food from pilgrim inns causes new digestive disasters, and the constant prayers required at each shrine exhaust remaining energy. But the shared misery creates camaraderie. Robert teaches you 15 different ways to describe cough consistency. The boil-covered merchant's wife shares her private stash of wine, and everyone pretends not to notice when supposed lepers remove their bandages at night, revealing ordinary faces. Canterbury finally appears on day 3, its cathedral spires promising either salvation or death, depending on your remaining strength. The city swarms with pilgrims, creating a humanitarian disaster of sick people crowding together in hope of healing. Inn prices triple, food quality halves, and enterprising locals sell everything from St. Thomas's bathwater to stones from the holy murder spot at prices that would shock London merchants. The cathedral itself is a masterpiece of crowd control designed to extract maximum donation per miracle sought. You queue for hours, shuffling forward inch by painful inch, while monks collect offerings and vendors sell last-minute healing supplements. The actual saint's shrine is barely visible through crowds and incense smoke, but anticipation builds to fever pitch. Surely this much suffering must produce proportional healing. When your turn finally comes, you're allowed exactly 10 seconds at the shrine before monks hurry you along for the next desperate soul. You touch the cold stone containing St. Agatha's thigh bone, or someone's thigh bone, anyway. Pray with fervor born of exhaustion, and feel nothing. No lightning bolt of healing, no sudden strength, just the same fever and rash that's plagued you for weeks. The anticlimactic reality of miracle-seeking hits harder than any physician's treatment. But the journey home feels different. Maybe it's exhaustion masquerading as peace, or maybe the shared suffering bonded your soul to fellow pilgrims. But something has shifted. Your symptoms remain, yet the terror has faded. You've survived physicians, surgeons, priests, monasteries, and divine intervention itself. What's left to fear? The roadside shrines seem less portentous, more like scenery. Even Robert's coughing becomes rhythmic traveling music rather than death's herald. You arrive home to find the physicians assembled in your chamber like carrion birds who've spotted fresh meat. Word of your pilgrimage has spread. And now Master Hugh, Master Roland, and Master Francis debate whether divine intervention has altered your humoral balance enough to warrant completely new treatment approaches. Your survival of their previous ministrations, the monastery quarantine, and an arduous pilgrimage apparently proves you're either blessed by God or cursed by Satan. They're still arguing which. The pilgrimage changes everything, Master Hugh declares, producing yet another chart, this one showing how holy travel affects bile production. Sacred journeys heat the blood while cooling the spirit. We must recalibrate all treatments accordingly. The fact that you look exactly as sick as when they last saw you doesn't dampen their theoretical enthusiasm. If anything, your continued illness presents an exciting challenge to their accumulated wisdom. William Blackfinger has also returned, eager to examine blood that's been blessed by proximity to saints. He's brought new fleams, sharper and rustier than before, and speaks excitedly about a technique he learned involving heated cups to draw blood through the skin. Saw a Moorish trader demonstrate it, he says, producing glass vessels that look designed for torture rather than healing. Very advanced, very painful, very effective. Your mother-in-law, exhausted from the pilgrimage, weakly protests another round of bloodletting. She's developed her own cough, Robert's parting gift to the travelling party, and lacks energy for fierce advocacy. Your wife stands guard. But the assembled medical authorities overwhelm domestic resistance through sheer professional certainty. They're like theologians debating angel dancing while you burn in very earthly fever. The final diagnostic circus reaches new heights of absurdity. Master Roland insists on examining your pilgrim badges for celestial influence. Master Francis measures the distance you traveled and calculates how much corrupt humor you should have sweated out per mile. William prepares his bleeding bowls while Father Benedict, who somehow inserted himself into the consultation, suggests the pilgrimage might have driven demons deeper, requiring more aggressive exorcism. I propose a synthesis, Master Hugh announces grandly, combining all our approaches into one supreme treatment. The others nod, each seeing opportunity to apply their favorite tortures simultaneously. Bloodletting while Mercury rises, followed by trepanation during Mars's hour, concluded with exorcism as Venus sets. It's medical treatment as astronomical theatre, with your body as the unfortunate stage. But something has changed in you since Canterbury. The terror that once gripped you has transformed into weary acceptance, even dark humour. As they debate whether to drill your skull before or after draining more blood, you find yourself laughing, a rasping, painful sound that startles everyone into silence. The learned men exchange glances, trying to determine if inappropriate laughter indicates brain fever or demonic possession. "Gentlemen," you croak, voice still raw from weeks of illness and questionable treatments. "I've been bled, purged, poisoned, fumigated, exorcised, quarantined, and pilgrimaged. I've swallowed mercury, worn toad necklaces, and narrowly escaped having my skull ventilated. If God wanted me dead, He's had ample opportunity. If He wants me alive, your treatments won't change His mind." This theological checkmate stumps them momentarily. Arguing with divine will edges dangerously close to heresy, but abandoning treatment suggests professional inadequacy. Master Hugh rallies first. God works through earthly instruments. We are His healing hands. But even He sounds uncertain. Your survival, despite their best efforts to kill you medicinally, having shaken His confidence. Your wife seizes the moment of doubt. "Perhaps," she suggests diplomatically, "we should observe whether the pilgrimage's effects manifest over time. Rushing into treatment might interfere with ongoing divine healing." This brilliantly frames doing nothing as medically prudent rather than abandoning hope. The physicians grasp this face-saving logic eagerly, each claiming they were about to suggest watchful waiting. They prescribe a final round of treatments, but half-heartedly, mild purgatives rather than violent ones. Theoretical bloodletting, if symptoms worsen, and dietary restrictions so contradictory they cancel each other out. Master Francis suggests wearing a badger's tooth for luck. Master Roland recommends sleeping with your head pointing north, and Master Hugh insists on daily urine examination, though he seems to have forgotten what he's looking for. As they file out, clutching fees your wife pays with gritted teeth, you realize you're going to survive, not because of their treatments, but despite them. Your fever is breaking naturally, the rash fading without intervention, your strength returning as your body finally overcomes. Whatever foreign wool or tainted food or passing contagion started this nightmare. Medieval medicine's greatest achievement might be failing to kill patients faster than nature can heal them. The room empties except for family. Your mother-in-law, coughing but triumphant, declares she knew prayer would work eventually. Your wife holds your hand, exhausted from weeks of fighting off increasingly bizarre medical interventions. Through the window, You hear town criers announcing a new miracle cure arrived from Venice. Powdered dragon scales guaranteed to cure all ailments. Some other poor soul will discover it's just ground fish bones sold at ruby prices. You close your eyes, not in death, but in rest. Tomorrow you'll rise, weak but recovering, having survived humanity's most dangerous era of being sick. The physicians will claim credit for your healing, each insisting their particular treatment proved crucial. The priests will praise God's mercy in sparing you. The wise women will quietly note their herbs helped more than prayers or poisons. But you'll know the truth. Sometimes the best medicine is surviving the cure. As the evening settles over your modest merchant's house, the church bells ring compline, their bronze voices carrying across the rooftops like a lullaby for the living and the dead. You've made it through the day, through the weeks, through treatments that would terrify even the bravest soul. Your breathing comes easier now, deep and steady, no longer the shallow gasps of fever. The candle flame flickers gently in your chamber, casting dancing shadows on walls that have witnessed so much suffering and strange salvation. Outside, the night sounds of medieval life continue. A dog barking, cartwheels on cobblestones, someone singing off-key in the tavern down the lane, life persisting despite plague and physicians, demons and diagnoses. Your wife has fallen asleep in her chair, head tilted at an uncomfortable angle, still clutching the pouch of herbs Marjorie left. Her face, even in exhausted slumber, shows the strain of being your guardian against medical enthusiasm. Your mother-in-law snores softly from her corner, finally allowing herself rest after weeks of fierce advocacy disguised as folk remedies. The fear that gripped you for so long has melted away like morning frost, leaving behind a strange peace. You've looked death in the eye, not in the form of disease, but in the shape of its supposed cures. Mercury and bloodletting, drilling and demons, each treatment a small death survived. Your body, wiser than all the university learning, simply did what bodies do. It healed itself while the learned men played their elaborate games. Tomorrow the sun will rise on a world where sickness still means terror, where physicians still poison with confidence, where prayers and pilgrimages remain the last hope of the desperate. But tonight, in this quiet moment between Compline and Matins, you're simply alive, scarred, exhausted, probably permanently damaged by various treatments, but breathing steadily in your own bed. The rash has faded to faint marks that will probably linger for months. Your arm bears the scars of enthusiastic bloodletting. Your stomach may never fully recover from the purgatives and potions, but these are battle wounds from a war you've won, not through strength or virtue or divine intervention, but through the simple, stubborn refusal of your body to give up, despite everyone's best efforts to help it along. Sleep comes gently now, not the fevered unconsciousness of illness, but the natural drift of exhaustion finding rest. In your dreams, there are no physicians with their charts, no priests with their exorcisms, no barber surgeons with their terrible enthusiasm, just darkness and peace and the steady rhythm of your heart, beating on despite everything, carrying you toward another dawn in this strange, dangerous, miraculous age of survival against all odds.